This is what it looks like after the asparagus ferns have been cut down. I don't cut them all the way down to the surface. What I'm going to do next, I'm going to put compost directly over the ferns. I've kind of hilled it up around them. I've got a couple of volunteers to what honestly look like they may be forsythia. Y'all tell me what you think. There's one right there. And then there's one there. And one here. Alternating nodes. That's what made me think forsythia. Because there's a forsythia right there. And the wind is blowing in my face. There's another forsythia over there. Anyway, so compost over the rows. It'll be darker brown. And then in between where we walk, that's just going to be regular aged wood chips. So come spring, we'll be able to see, even if these tips of these old ferns have rotten back and decomposed, we'll still be able to see where the rows are. I'll still be able to look in the right place to know where the spears will pop up. You know, as we've said it before, seeing those spears, it's just about a pretty guaranteed, it's a guaranteed mark of our spring. We know that once those spears popping up, it's time to get busy in the garden. Ha! Still looking good. Artichoke's still doing its thing. Got some cabbage coming in down there. Thyme and what else? That's our garlic and carrots in the vol-proof container growing. And then there's our apple tree has been pruned down. I don't want to show you Mike and Kim because they're over there on the left and I haven't finished pruning them yet. But looking good here in my Eden. How's your Eden doing on Thanksgiving? Here's a first scoop of compost. Good stuff. Wood chip compost. Been turned, kept aerobic. It's going to go right over the top of these rows of asparagus. I'm going to basically scoop it on with, you know, that little fork right there? And once all of the rows are covered to their tips, and I know there's a sufficient amount of compost over the top, I know that it'll lock in whatever seed pods are in place, and it'll keep them there. They've all been raked right to the center, so that's where we want them. So if they do germinate, they'll germinate right there where they're supposed to. There's no overcrowding going on. You know, the wood chips are soft, the compost is soft. When they need more space, they just kind of push everything out of the way and they keep on trucking. So, alright, let me do some labor here. Y'all don't want to see me labor. And I'll get it all on there and we'll look at the next step too. Alright, here we can see I've laid the compost on top. I've basically raked the space in between each row of asparagus clear, making sure that the compost or the bulk of the compost and whatever seeds may have been present are all raked onto the actual asparagus rows. Now I'm going to come back in here with some fresher wood chips because I want to create a barrier against weeds and against the invasion of the weeds that could potentially come from, well, anywhere out here. This is all Bermuda grass and everything else. And in doing so, I'll put the fresher wood chips down that are more resistive to those grasses. And it'll buy me a year, maybe 2 years of resistance. So I don't have to do this every year. But either way, the concept is I'm going to replenish everything into the walkways with the fresh chips that I get, you know, that come right off the truck and don't sit here for very long. And then they're going to end up in here. So they're still fresh. They still have those resistive chemistries that are in them. Antifungals, antibacterials, you know, things like that that are going to keep the bad mojo from getting set in place. That will be spread right to the center where these gaps are. They look like traditional furrows, but this is not dirt. This is actually back to Eden soil. It's compost and wood chips. That's all, nothing more. There are some minerals that I put in there. I have talked about putting hydrated lime to keep things fairly neutral or just better than neutral for the asparagus. They seem to appreciate that. Over the years, we've expanded the width of the rows as well because I like to put a little more space in there. These last 3 or 4 rows, you know, I was a little more wise when I set the garden up after, you know, doing this for a few years. You realize, hey, ferns grow big and we're going to pick ferns and spears at the same time. You know, the ferns will be in play. You're going to have to kind of swim through them. The asparagus ferns are a little bit irritating, especially since it's usually hot when we're harvesting. And if you have a lot of bare or exposed skin, you know, you get that all over. You get the itchy willy willies. So, you know, we're learning. It's okay to devote just a little more space, make your rows just a little bit wider. Here you can see they're more like 4 foot on center. It's about 48 inch, center to center. Then they reduce over here to about 36 inches. and 36 inches, and then what seems like 30 inches. It's not quite enough. Wish we would have done better in the beginning. But anyway, little tips of trade, you know. Hey, come with everything as a learning experience. Every day we're picking on some new little tidbits that we might have not recognized the day before, but these are some of them. So I'm going to go ahead and start spreading some of that more coarse chips in the middle. We'll get another view here, and before you know it, we'll be done and ready for spring. So here you can see it start to shape up. And some hawks screaming in the background. You can see the areas of compost are clearly and distinctly visible. And then the spaces that used to look like troughs in between have been filled in with wood chips. So those coarse wood chips right there are going to keep me from ending up with weeds, keep me from ending up with having to, you know, pull grasses and dandelions and all that stuff. They just won't be in there. It won't. This is like uber consistent. It works every time. As long as you don't have a bunch of grass in your fresh chips, you know, from them sitting up somewhere for a few months, and maybe your landscape committee is aiming the, you know, the exhaust chute on the lawnmower their way. As long as you don't have that in your wood chips and they're basically just wood chips decomposing or sitting, you're not going to have those issues in here. Now look here, you can see how deep the troughs appear. So we're getting about maybe 4 to 6, maybe a little bit more after I've trampled on it. I do tend to go over it to make sure that I got a good dense lay of it. But it works so effectively, folks. Don't be afraid to try this. Really, look at that fork too. You can see how far it's stabbed in. You know, I mean, it's, the depth of this is every bit of 18 inch, maybe 20 inch above the red clay. So, you know, with 18 inch of this compost and wood chips sitting above, from years of me depositing it here, there's really no need to be messing around with the dirt. It doesn't increase the size of my plants, doesn't increase the size of my yields or harvest, does no such thing. What it does do is it kind of makes my back sore, because it's hard to mess with. You know, it's heavy, it gets waterlogged. If there's too much of it around here on the ground, I can't enter my garden. So we really do like to have plenty of this organic matter sitting on top. You know, those little black mats right there, they work for so many things. But are we short on minerals? No, we're not. We got plenty of worms in there. The worms are bringing the minerals up from down below. They just do that. It's what they do. It's like it's their job. Okay, I'm going to do the rest of this. Okay, growers, so here you go. Here you can see. All 7 of these rows have basically been filled in with a much younger version of wood chip. And the rows where the asparagus is have been covered with wood chip compost. That compost is, well, it's pretty good stuff, because I've been putting compost tea on it. And it's been aging for quite some time. It's been turned over. I never let it get anaerobic. Never did it have a nasty smell to it. It always smelled like the goodness of the garden. And it got laid on there, and you're going to see here, as soon as spring opens up, I'll back out here taking more pictures and videos, and you'll see how the ferns start to push, how the spears start to pop up and say, hey, I'm here, I'm ready to go. You know, let's make this happen. But, you know, as is always the case, this works not only if you're, you know, growing your food above grade in a raised bed. It also works if you're growing in, say, a galvanized steel raised bed or some other raised bed that's designed to make harvesting easier. It makes no difference where you apply these principles. You know, they'll work here, they'll work over the top of a concrete slab. It really will. You lay this stuff deep enough, it becomes the soil. It becomes the carbon matter that those plants need to become, of all things, carbon-based life forms. Okay, if you grabbed a little golden nugget of information, please, by all means, click like, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, maybe even share it with someone you love.